In this episode, we speak with Kurt Estes, Principal and Head of Corporate Development at Sikich. Kurt focuses on M&A strategy and execution for Sikich's growth initiatives. Since joining the firm in 2008, he has overseen more than 20 acquisitions and has led dozens of transactions through Sikich's investment banking practice. His background spans corporate development, investment banking, venture capital, and innovation, and he holds more than 25 patents. Kurt was recognized by the Consulting Report as a top 25 M&A consultant and leader of 2025. Sikich is a professional services firm providing consulting and technology and compliance services to public and private sector organizations, with approximately 2,000 team members and operations across North America, the United Kingdom, and EMEA. I am your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the Executive Chairman of Market Insight Media and Managing Partner of Growth Cap. He is the host of Top Consultant, a podcast featuring today's best consultants who advise and provide services to corporations, governments, nonprofits, and other organizations. Executives and key decision makers tune in to Top Consultant to identify the most knowledgeable and experienced consultants for their most important projects.
Kurt, thank you so much for joining us. It's a delight to be with you.
I'm glad to be here. I was looking forward to it.
I thought where we could kick off is some background on Sikich, because many in our audience may not know that this firm has been around for decades and does a substantial amount of business in a variety of sectors. So let's start with the overview.
Okay, well, Sikich is a diversified professional services firm. We're based out of Chicago, and today we're over 2,000 people, and we have a variety of services. And we can go into that in a minute, but if you want the background, we actually trace our roots back to 1928, where it was a small accounting firm. They grew to the point where they had 3 offices, and then one of those offices was picked up by McGladrey at the time, and then the other 2 became Sikich Gardner, which then became Sikich. And then in, I believe, 98, we made our first foray into services outside of CPA, in that we purchased a kind of a break-fix IT firm, because we saw that a lot of our clients were referring work out to other companies for technology work and so forth. And if you know your history, that we're coming up on Y2K, and there's a lot of work being done then. And since then, we've just embraced that, and we've been expanding our number of services for a long time. So we've had a nice growth trajectory. Today, we have services that don't just include assurance and tax work. We have wealth management. We do a lot of work for the federal government, both in consulting as well as in audits of federal agencies. A lot of technology-enabled services. We're a top 1% Microsoft partner. We're the 3rd largest NetSuite partner. We've got a Salesforce practice, a 60-person cybersecurity practice, and a number of other things. A lot of people compare us to a smaller version of Deloitte in terms of the breadth of our services. I wear 2 hats within Sikich. I'm the head of our corporate development, which means I do all of our acquisitions, or I'm responsible for that. I've got an enormous team that helps me do those things, quite frankly, a really good team. And then I'm also a principal within our investment bank, where we do a lot of sell-side work. We do a fair amount of buy-side work, and then we also do some capital raise. Most of what I do over there in the investment bank is in sell-side origination and so forth. So since I've been at Sikich, and I joined in 2008, it's all been transaction work. It's all been M&A related type work. You probably looked into my background. That's not where I started.
Right. And we'll get into your background in terms of the split in your responsibilities with corp dev and investment banking. Which area is more active? Do you find that there are a lot of target consulting firms to acquire, or other types of firms to acquire into Sikich?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We evaluate hundreds and hundreds of firms every year. And then that comes from our own research, but also investment banks sending us stuff, and then just relationships we have. I believe the last report I did to our executive board, I think we had said we'd reviewed over 800 opportunities in the previous 12 months. So we look at a lot. There's a lot out there, and there's a lot of activity. And we can go into a little bit. There's been a particularly large rise in activity of CPA firms selling, and we can go into what's going on there if you like later. But suffice to say, there's a lot of things that we look at. And because our breadth of services is so large, we have an appetite for a lot of different areas. Now, on the investment banking side, I would say, and I think this holds true across all M&A, quite frankly, there's a lot of demand out there for good companies. I would say that the last year or so, the pace of transactions haven't been what I would like to see. I always like to see a lot more happening and so forth. I think there's some uncertainty in the marketplace and some folks who have, for a variety of reasons, maybe had a little bit of a slow year. And so they're pushing off transactions. But the demand for really good firms is still very high.
Hmm.
If it's a firm that has a story and has some issues and so forth, the demand is a little bit less.
Right.
But I think, frankly, the supply, it will come back. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. There's a lot of people just putting off selling, and they're getting to the point where they need to retire or move on or have a liquidation event. I think, in the next year or two, you'll probably see a pretty sharp uptick in M&A activity.
And within M&A, are you focused on certain sectors, or does it tie into your overall consulting relationships?
Yes and yes. So within the investment bank, we're very strong in business services, as you might imagine. I do a lot of buying of business services.
Hmm.
We're pretty strong in technology. We'll go into my background later, but I've got a pretty deep technology background.
Hmm.
And then being in the Midwest and with people we do an awful lot of manufacturing and distribution.
Hmm.
We've also done a fair amount of work in life sciences, especially on the buy side. We have an individual in our group who kind of specializes in that as well. But to be truthful, on the investment bank, we're pretty agnostic. We do a lot of work in various sectors, without a doubt. I mean, we have some deep expertise in certain industries that we kind of talked about. But I was going to say, last year is an example of an area where is just a random area. We represented the seller in selling the last independent landfill in Indiana.
Oh, wow.
It was a wonderful experience. The client was an amazing person. He and his brother were just amazing people. The buyer was great. It was one of the smoothest deals I've ever been part of. And he just great people all the way around.
Hmm.
That's what excites me about this whole thing, quite frankly. I love meeting new people and entrepreneurs in particular. I've been working with entrepreneurs for almost my entire career, and they're a special type of person. And it's just so much fun to work with them and help them realize their goals and so forth.
And then back to the corporate development role, and you mentioned kind of the number of CPA firms or the attractiveness of that kind of business, obviously recurring clients.
Yeah.
Is that what you're more focused on, CPA firms versus maybe niche sector consulting?
Like I said, our appetite is pretty broad. We are certainly very interested in identifying and bringing in good CPA firms into Sikich. With tech firms, a tech firm is sold as say, a $50 million firm. They do Oracle implementations.
Yeah,
I can be reasonably confident that there's going to be 5 or 10 more of those next year.
right.
$100 million CPA firm takes a very long time to create. So once that gets purchased by somebody, it's gone.
Hmm.
And so there's a little bit of an urgency, I think, in identifying good firms. At the end of the day, especially business services and professional services, your assets are the people.
Hmm.
And they walk out the door every day and they have to come back. So anytime you're doing any kind of transaction that has to do with business services, especially, the fit has to be good.
Hmm.
So we look at a lot of folks, and even if it makes sense from a services and a geographic and a financial perspective, if the fit's not there, you're not going to do it. And it's no fault from one side or the other. Some firms have radically different cultures. One may not be better than the other, but if they're going to come together and be successful going forward, there has to be a good fit.
Hmm.
So we look at a lot of that when we're making our acquisition. So your question was, are we focused on CPA? We absolutely are. That being said, I've got a couple right now under LOI that are not CPA at all.
Hmm.
And so our appetite is pretty broad.
Uh-huh.
Again, it comes down to, are they the right services? Does it financially make sense? And most importantly, is the fit there?
And in terms of overall growth, I imagine you're doing also organic growth. So you're hiring into your existing practices. How aggressive are you on the organic side? I imagine you have your pick of talented consultants. Say there's a rising star at Deloitte or Accenture, and maybe you come into contact with them and you could say, hey, you know what? You came over here. You could build an entire practice and we can ramp, right alongside with you or under you or in partnership with you. I think it's pretty compelling for someone that's rising through the ranks. So how hard do you push on that side?
It's important. It is something that we do, and we will make investments. We actually recently invested heavily in our data analysis and AI to grow from scratch. The truth is, growing something from scratch takes a lot more time.
Hmm.
And while we will do that, we'll also work with our individual business leaders, and they'll say, hey, I have an idea for a business that's very much related to what I do, but we need to invest in that. A good example of this would be our Q&C, Regulatory Quality and Compliance Group, was really big in insurtech and pharma tech, and they saw a great opportunity to go into legal tech.
Hmm.
And so we invested in that and they've grown that into a very nice business and that continues to grow. If we found a good acquisition that would augment that, we would pursue that as well. But Sikich, without a doubt, is not afraid to place bets and grow organically. And again, because of the very nature of our organization, most of our leaders are very entrepreneurial. We've got a lot of folks that come in through acquisition, and then we just have a lot of people who've been here for a while who've kind of picked up that entrepreneurial spirit
Hmm.
and not afraid to make bets to grow the business on our own. That being said, my job is not so much that. My job is more, let me go out and acquire. So I'm trying to augment these business cases and so forth and add on that way. So you might love to interview our CEO, Chris Geyer, at some point. He's an amazing individual and he could probably give you a much better perspective on all the bets we're making to do organic growth.
Let's touch on the partnership with Bain, because I think that's super interesting. They're known to be aggressive in the consulting space. Obviously, they're, a major consulting firm themselves, but they're also partnering with boutiques or others. How did that come about? Was their thesis about growth aligned with yours? Did they influence how you thought about growth?
Yes and no. I don't go too deep into that, but I
Sure.
can give you kind of an overview. So Chris Geyer and I years ago talked about, hey, private equity's out there doing all these acquisitions. We both have a very deep M&A background. We know this space as well as anybody, and we've got a very good platform here. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could get limited partner type investment into our organization to grow it?
Hmm.
And we thought about that and talked about then we went out and partnered with PJT to be a placement agent to help us find if there was investors out there like that. And they brought us to Bain Special Situation Group and we hit it off. And they have been an unbelievable partner. They are great people. They have a one seat on the board and they provide very good insights. They're always available for us if we want to talk to them about an investment thesis or get their thoughts on this and that. And they've been nothing but good.
Hmm.
And so I think I wouldn't say changed our perspective. It enabled more aggressive pursuit of acquisitions because now we have a little bit more capital to do that with.
Hmm.
But I think it's more augmented our strategy. Again, I can't say enough good things. They're good folks.
Excellent. I imagine there's not much overlap between what they might do in their consulting arm versus what you would do.
Not knowing all of their portfolio companies, I can't say that that's the case. I mean, I have worked with Bain and Co., their consulting group before,
Right.
and they do a great job as well. But I don't know that I'm qualified to say if there's no overlap or not.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I will say about the Bain investment that you probably know, the Sikich was the first US CPA firm to take a minority investment from private equity.
Mm-hmm.
Everything prior to that had been a majority acquisition. And we went out with that in mind. We did not want to give up a majority control, and we didn't. And we were the first one to do that. Since then, there's been a couple others that have done something that I'm told is minority and so forth, but we were the first one to get it done.
Hmm. You've got a great background. You went to Purdue, engineer, I believe, by
Absolutely.
academic trade, and then got your MBA. And then you were at Motorola for quite a bit of time in different capacities. So maybe give us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I did a bachelor's and a master's at Purdue. So 6 years straight, went through, got them all. My first job was at Whirlpool. I was in their R&D group, and I got a call sometime in the second year at Whirlpool that they had a tech shelf group that they were going to be working on technology that I'd written a lot of papers about. It's very much related to my thesis. I've been published in international journals and so forth. It was advanced electronic cooling using liquid vapor cooling techniques.
Hmm.
More than you need to know, probably. But so they called me and said, we'd like you to join us. Engineering is great to learn. It's wonderful to learn about how things work. And I love the science and all that kind of stuff. Working in engineering is like, it's okay, but I found it a little bit on the boring side. For me, I have a touch of ADD. And I said, I'll come. Will you pay for my MBA? Yes, we will. So I went. And so I started out in their tech shelf group and I started my MBA pretty soon after joining Motorola. I was doing it at night at the Kellogg night program. And towards the end, I had to figure out what am I going to do with my MBA? I'm going to have it. What am I going to do? So at that point in my career, I'd had a few patents
Hmm.
and now I had a business degree. And I thought, well, I'm an expert at this stuff. So I put together with another colleague of mine a proposal to create a group to monetize non-core patents that Motorola had. And Motorola had a lot of them.
Hmm.
So we got in front of a senior director of strategy. He had the same kind of idea. We formed a group and we started doing technology licensing right away. So we were pretty aggressive, got that going. That group kind of got pulled out of the central part of Motorola into the business units when they saw that people were making money doing this. And when that happened, I joined Motorola Ventures, which was just getting started. And I was doing a little work for them on site anyway. So I worked in venture capital from 99 to '04. So both sides of the tech bubble. And we can have a whole different conversation about that. I've got stories there. But I came in there very early on, helped them create a lot of their standard operating procedures and so forth. And then towards the end of that, my supervisor there was tapped on the shoulder to create like an early stage accelerator incubation group for new technologies and new businesses within Motorola. He asked me to help put that together. We put together a proposal and all of a sudden created a new organization at Motorola. And I did that for 4 years. 2008 comes around. There's a big downturn. They start cutting things. I decide I'm just going to go off on my own and consult. So I created an LLC. I was doing some corporate innovation consulting, some corporate venture capital consulting, intellectual property strategy consulting. And during that time, I was introduced to Sikich. I was introduced specifically to Chris Geyer, who's our current CEO. But at the time, he was restarting the investment bank within Sikich.
I see.
We hit it off, and I joined Sikich in December of '08. And since then, that's where I've been. So it's a very atypical kind of route to becoming a managing director / principal in the investment bank and head of corporate development. So it's been an interesting walk,
Yeah.
but it's been fun. It's been fun.
And having seen the tremendous growth between 2008 to present day that Sikich has accomplished, what would you attribute that to? Obviously, good leadership is there, but give us a sense for, because not all consulting firms advance or scale as rapidly.
Well, a few things. You hit it on the head. Leadership is incredibly important. Below that is having a good team who understands how to do this stuff and is supportive. But quite frankly, I think some of it goes back to, when Jim Sikich, who was the prior managing partner to Chris Geyer, he convinced the partners to make that first acquisition of a technology company way back in '98. It got the partnership comfortable with making investments in other companies and bringing in new service areas and so forth. One of the issues and one of the reasons a lot of CPA firms can't do what we did is because if you think about a partnership, all the profits are distributed to the partners every year. And so if I go to my partnership and say, hey, I want to buy this company over here, but it's going to cost me $10 million. Well, that takes $10 million out of my pocket. And if I'm an older partner, I'm going to say, well, I don't want to do that because I'm about ready to retire. And that doesn't mean anything to me. So there's a lot of issues with respect to making that happen. But since we had started doing that so early and we had created kind of a culture of doing that, it enabled us to continue doing that. And the partners were able to reap a lot of the benefits. The other thing I would say, and again, this is before I became a partner at Sikich, now principal, since we took the investment, but I have to give an awful lot of credit to the early partners of Sikich because not only did they have the foresight and the guts to make those investments, they also invested heavily in our infrastructure, such that when we make an acquisition and bring them in, we have more than enough infrastructure services to take it forward. So we don't have to make a lot of additional investments to kind of leverage the investments we're making. So there's a lot of things, but I think vision and leadership stand up there. And then frankly, like I said, I got to tip my hat to the partners that preceded me because they understood what we were doing, they embraced it, and they made those investments.
Was there something unique about the way the partnership was structured and incentives such that they had confidence in pursuing more of those long dated projects that may or may not pay out as much as their current pay would?
The way that partner pay then was structured, it was a little bit different than the normal accounting firm, but it still was the distribution of all profits. So it's more of a mindset. I think it was Jim Sikich convincing people that we had to do this. And then once we started doing it, people said, oh, wow, this is good. This is actually creating benefits. And so if you have some success that way, then it's easier to do more.
Right.
So I can't sit there and say, there was definitely this or that. One thing I will say is when Chris Geyer took over as managing partner, everything accelerated from there because he has a deep background in M&A. He, prior to joining Sikich, had his own firm where he purchased 13 different companies and took distressed companies, turned them around and sold them. So he had understood this very, very well. And when he came in, it was very much a focus of, hey, it's one Sikich. So there's no more book of business. There's no more, this is my client. No, everything's a Sikich client. And we're going to do everything we can to benefit Sikich and grow the entire organization. And he did a great job, and not just him, but all of our senior leadership did a great job of communicating that and making that part of our culture. Again, it's just how we've evolved. And I'm not going to say anything bad about the way anybody else does things. It's worked exceptionally well for us. And again, I just kind of go back and say, we've had some very good leadership.
I imagine too, when you bring folks in, and particularly at more senior levels, they have to fit the culture. What are some of the attributes you look for in an individual?
Well, it's interesting because again, I keep talking about Chris Geyer, but he actually told our CHRO that said, look, when you're hiring people, make sure they know who they're joining, make sure they understand who we are, what we are, and how we approach things. So Chris always says, like, I want to hire people who sit on the edge of their seat, who are eager to go out there and get things done, very energetic, want to push to grow the company and so forth. So that is kind of the mindset. On top of that, when people say, well, what's your culture at Sikich? I always say, obviously entrepreneurial. But the other thing I say is we're a golden rule company. We treat our people like we want to be treated. We treat our clients like we want to be treated. And then we're a meritocracy. We have structured our organization in such a way that we're able to reward the people who come in and do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, people that come in and coast, they don't tend to last as long. We're looking for those aggressive folks who are out there and are wanting to grow the company and so forth. And we've done a good job of finding those folks. And again, I've obviously worked in a number of different places, some, Fortune 50 type companies and so forth. And there's nowhere I'd rather be. The culture here, the people here are amazing.
If there was one piece of advice you could share with someone else in the consulting industry, maybe they're in the earlier phase of their career, what advice would you give on how to be successful?
There's a number of things I could say. And in fact, I spend a lot of my time talking to younger folks, a lot of them still in school, reach out and say, hey, I'd like to understand about your career and so forth. And I've mentored a whole lot of people when I was on the board at Illinois Institute of Technology. And a few things, I always say it's important to maintain your professional network. When I was at Motorola, I had a great internal network, but I didn't have a great outside network. And when you go out on your own, you realize how important that is. And so I give a lot of advice on how to do that and how to do it right and techniques that I've found to be good. And then the other thing, more recently, I would say if you're early in your career, you need to learn how to use AI appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people still use it like a Google search or something, and there's some power there. There's no doubt, but that's not unlocking the true potential. And especially if you're early in your career, later too, but early in your career, you better learn that, and it's going to help you to differentiate. I look at the whole AI thing as it's going to be very, very similar from going to calculators and handwritten ledgers to the kind of the step change of productivity you saw when Lotus 1, 2, 3 or spreadsheets came about. It's going to be the same kind of step change in productivity. So it's a tool, and you better learn how to use it.
Right.
So there's a couple things I would say that are probably on top of the list of things I would give advice on.
Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Is it okay if I give you more than one?
Yes.
Okay. So the first and foremost, and I'll kind of go in chronological order, but the first one is my father. And most young men would probably say the same thing. I would hope most young men would say the same thing. He taught me the value of hard work and honesty. The worst thing you do in my house is lie. I learned that at an early age. And then when I say hard work, is we did a lot of stuff to augment our family income. They include, raising fruits and vegetables to sell to restaurants and grocery stores and so forth, to firewood, to various different things. So there was a lot of hard work. And that was my job in high school and middle school, was that I didn't go out and take a different job. The next one I would say was at Motorola. The gentleman that led the group we formed to do the technology licensing had a profound effect on me. Unbelievably, I'm not going to mention his name. People could look it up, but he had spent some time in an ambassadorial role, I believe. And I learned a lot about how to sit in a meeting and observe people and understand the dynamics of the meeting. I've never met a person in my life that could sit in a meeting and really understand what people are thinking just by not just what they said, but how they were sitting, how they were acting and so forth. And so he helped me to understand the importance of good observation and trying to understand where other people are coming from, even if they're not telling you exactly where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple more. Going back one step, my master's advisor at Purdue was also had a profound impact on me. He taught me the importance of attention to detail, which is probably not my biggest strength. I'm more of a big picture thinker and so forth, but he was a taskmaster at the details, whether it came to your engineering drawings or your writing for the journals and so forth. Just an amazing individual. And then the last person, quite frankly, is our CEO. Chris Geyer brought me in and taught me, a lot about doing transactions and working with people. And I've learned an awful lot from him. I think at the end of the day, we probably all have a lot of people we learn from. And what you need to do is take what you like from various people and blend it into your own style.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
A couple. I have a special needs daughter, and that community is just amazing. When you have a child who has that, you get to meet an awful lot of other families that have similar issues and so forth. And anything that has to do with supporting those children is important to me. obviously donate to a lot of causes and so forth. But the community is just amazing. And young people who have these special needs are some of the sweetest people. A lot of them are some of the sweetest people you've ever met. Just unbelievably good folks. So that's very important to me. And then I think we already talked about this a few minutes ago. I also like to support people that are earlier in their careers, even, people are still at the tail end of college and getting ready to try to figure out where they're going to go. As I mentioned, I think I spent 10 years on the board of the business school for Illinois Tech. And part of that is I would mentor one or two people every semester. And I got a lot out of that. And even now I still get emails and so forth, and I'll try to make time to talk with these folks. So I think it's important. These are our future leaders. And if I can help them, I'm more than happy to. A lot of people have helped me, so kind of have to give back.
Wonderful. Well, Kurt, I want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
Well, thank you, RJ. Listen, I hope you have a great rest of your week. I see you're in New York, so please stay warm, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you too.